Cottrell, Senior Product Manager at Validation Cloud. Welcome to another episode of the Around the Block podcast series. Who is Validation Cloud? What's this podcast series? Very quickly, Validation Cloud is a Web3 data and AI company. We help people connect into leading networks. We do staking and provide insight into data going on chain. And Around the Block podcast is episodes where we speak to builders in the various ecosystems to find out more about what's going on. And with that, I'm delighted to welcome Ed Marquez from Hashgraph, who works with the Hedera network. So hello, Ed.
Hey, Aaron. Hey, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So what we're going to cover today is as we tend to do, we're going to learn a little bit about Ed and his journey into Web3. And then we're going to dive a little bit more into Hedera, like what's the network about, for those of you that might not be familiar, and then what are some of the tools that can help developers and builders get started, get their hands dirty with building stuff on the network. So Ed's going to walk us through some things there. So Ed, I know everyone has sort of this wandering path into Web3, sometimes by accident, sometimes by design. Maybe we'll start off with a little bit of background on yourself and sort of your journey.
Absolutely. We'd love to share that. So I lead developer relations for Hedera at Hashgraph. And Hashgraph is that entity doing all the marketing and engineering initiatives for the Hedera network. And I see this developer relations function as that group that seeks to attract, engage, and retain developers. So, we do quite a few things in our day-to-day. Now, in terms of my journey, I discovered Hedera in late 2019. Then I got myself embedded in the community, the ecosystem in 2020. And then I formally joined the network as an employee in 2021. And it was a fascinating journey. I actually come from a mechanical engineering background. As a fun fact, like I'm graduating from a second master's degree next week. So I'm super pumped about
congrats.
that and finishing that. Thank you so much. And then my background was control software, right? In 2019 and before, I was doing controls for hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles, and also control algorithms for even aerospace industry. And so discover Bitcoin in 2017, started going deep into Web3, found this thing that was Hedera. I was impressed. I thought it was too good to be true. And then I started watching all the videos from Lehman and Mans, the founders of the network. And I decided to go deep into the rabbit hole. So in my free time, I was playing with the SDKs. I thought it was a really fascinating technology, very easy to use. And I decided to make the jump, right? I figured in the end, it's all software. Before I was in embedded software development, and now I'm in Web3. So that was the journey that brought me here. So it was almost like accidental, but in the end, it's been intentional. So I'm glad it worked out.
Nice. So aerospace, automotive controls to sort of developer advocacy and relations at a leading network. Wow, there's probably other people have made that leap, maybe, but that's a unique one that I've heard so far. And maybe we'll jump in now to sort of an overview of Hedera, so people may be familiar with other sort of layer one networks, but for someone that isn't, like, if you could give sort of the 30,000 foot overview using our aerospace little theme, and then we can maybe dive down into some of the particulars. And then we'll take a pause and then maybe talk about some of the walkthroughs, if that sounds good.
That sounds fantastic. So Hedera is an EVM compatible open source layer one network. And I like to explain Hedera with two key differentiators in mind, one being the technology, another one being the governance. And so with the technology, we have a next generation consensus algorithm that allows us to be extremely performant, scalable, with fast finality. Now, I understand that there's great technology in other networks as well in 2025, so I'm not going to bore you with that. I think the key elements of the technology come down to fixed pricing, right? Because in other networks, even though they're fantastic, the pricing is not necessarily fixed. So if there's a lot of demand or a monkey picture gets popular, the pricing models often get crazy as well. Whereas in Hedera, what you have are fees denominated in US dollars. So those prices are fixed. And therefore, as a business, you can plan your operations, you can do forecasting, and so on. The other part that I like is that the finality is deterministic, right? And it happens in less than 3 seconds. So you don't have to wait for block confirmations to accumulate over a matter of minutes, in a probabilistic way. It's just deterministic finality that happens in a matter of seconds. And that's virtue of that next generation consensus algorithm. And then the other virtue that I'll highlight in terms of technology is the asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerance. What that means is that even in the presence of malicious actors, the network being under attack, the internet being under attack, the nodes of the network will still reach consensus, honest consensus, right? So it's ultimately the gold standard for security and robustness when it comes to these decentralized systems. So that is the technology, the key differentiators there that are a virtue of that consensus algorithm. If we think about the governance as the other differentiator, I'm going to describe a few of the different governance models that we've seen, right? You may have a governance model where it's one token, one vote. The problem is the power tends to consolidate in that model. Or maybe a different model is you only have 6 core developers that know everything and they, make decisions behind closed doors. Again, power tends to consolidate in that model. And what we have at Hedera is different, right? Because it is a council of global organizations, so enterprises, universities, Web3 companies, doing the governance and running the consensus nodes for the network. So it's almost like a representative democracy where you have people that are sitting in the front rows, understand the industry, understand the nuance of the issues, and then they make the governance decisions and also operate the network. With that in mind, I will say it's not only for enterprises and universities, right? It's a public permission network. Public meaning anyone can build on it. They don't have to ask permission. And then the permission aspect is only the council right now is operating those nodes, but we have plans to open that up later on in the future. So that's, cool. My 30,000 foot view at the technology level and governance level.
Nice. And the council right now is it 30 to 40 organizations, as you say, globally spread?
That's a fantastic question. The total capacity of the council is 39 council members. Right now, I believe we're at somewhere between 30 and 32. I apologize. It might be 30 or 31. I can't remember exactly. But we still have a little bit of room to get to that 39 total number.
Got it. And in terms of just, I guess, basics about the network. So the token is HBAR. And then I guess the best explorer to use, like you've got the public hashscan.com one. Is that where people would go and see transactions and blocks and things?
That's absolutely right. So HBAR is the token. And, I love to talk about HBAR as both the fuel for the network and also the security mechanism for the network, right? Because the HBAR, the token, fuels the Web3 API calls that you make as a builder, as a developer. But it's also the security mechanism for the network because we are proof of stake. And so, having that stake well distributed across the nodes is going to be important for that consensus mechanism. And then what was the other part of the question? We talked about HBAR and the other part.
Oh, I was just saying about if people are curious about block explorers, they can use Hashscan, right?
That's the one. Hashscan, it's an open source explorer, so people can take it, they can bring it into their own application, but we also have it available as a utility for the ecosystem where they can explore entity information, accounts, transactions. Even change their staking and account preferences, if they want to manage that directly by pairing their wallet to Hashscan. And it's a fantastic tool for also your smart contract transactions. There's the ability to verify your smart contract, debug, look at the source code and all of that as well.
Awesome. Cool. So I guess maybe let's jump in. I know you had a couple of sort of walkthroughs. So, if someone's hypothetically familiar with Ethereum or another EVM chain, like there's things they can use with Hedera to sort of get started. Is that right?
That is absolutely right. So one thing that I want to highlight about Hedera for builders is that you have 2 paths to build on Hedera. Whether you're coming from the traditional Web2 world, if you're coming from embedded or enterprise software or something else, you already know Java, JavaScript, or Go, or Rust. You have a very entry point to Hedera because we have SDKs. You don't even have to learn the smart contracts paradigm. You can just start working with these SDKs that you install into your application. and you have access to classes and methods that you've worked with before or that you're familiar with, and then that allows you to have Web3 components into your system, into your application. And then if you're a Web3 developer, or you have requirements that need the automation of a smart contract, that need the programmability of a smart contract, then you have the EVM, the Besu EVM available here on Hedera to do all those things that you can also do on Ethereum. So when it comes to onboarding, part of the work that my team has done comes to providing tools, excellent tools that devs can use to make that onboarding experience as easy and smooth as possible. So let me share my screen here. And what I'm showing here is the Hedera Playground. So if you just go to hedera.com/playground or Google Hedera Playground, this is what you're going to find. And this here is the developer portal, right? So it's embedded right there in that place where all developers start. And this playground allows you to learn those SDKs very easily without installing anything right from your browser. So what you see here is, like, in that portal, I have my credentials in this dashboard. If I go to that playground view, then it's all embedded in that same view. I can choose the type of account that I want. Hedera supports a couple of types of accounts. Typically, I like working with ECDSA, which are the same keys from Ethereum and other EVM chains. And this playground right now supports Java and JavaScript. We're going to be adding Rust hopefully by the end of June. So, if you want to learn Rust, or learn Rust in the context of Hedera with just a few clicks, then, this is going to be a place to go. And what I like as well is that it unfolds or presents to you these Hedera services, Hedera sets of functionality in a way that is very easy to understand and follow. So, we have a token service for tokenization without the need for programming a smart contract. You have a consensus service that is for creating decentralized messaging buses or messaging queues. And then, of course, we have everything related to accounts and HBAR. So I can just come here, create accounts, maybe transfer HBAR, and so on. So I'm just going to create another account and execute it. And just by clicking a few times and executing, then I can see the results of that transaction on blockchain, right? So it takes coding your first transaction on a blockchain from minutes and maybe hours, if you were to do a local setup and installations and all of that, to a matter of seconds. So that's one of the reasons that I love that. And it points you to Hashcan, which we spoke about earlier, right? So it's that network explorer that allows you to see the results of the actions that you've taken. So you can see details about the type of transaction, the time, some information about the entities and payers involved, and then the HBAR transfer that took place to complete the transaction.
Got it. And we're all on testnet at the moment. Did I see that right?
That is correct. Yep. That is all cool. On testnet right now.
And
the great thing is...
go on, sorry.
I was going to just simply add, the great thing is, like, once I'm ready, once I've prototyped my application, I thought about a flow, I can always share my code. If I want to send it to someone else, they can get it on the playground. I can copy it, or I can download it and bring it to my local IDE to move closer to that production deployment on the mainnet. But the playground only supports testnet deployments.
Got it. And most people, am I right in saying Hedera has the mainnet, the testnet, and the Previewnet? But would most developers just use testnet and mainnet, or should they need to know about the Previewnet?
I think Previewnet is a good FYI. It's a good thing to know about. So the goal with these three environments that we provide is to have a phased approach to releases of new software. So Hedera innovates every month. Every month we have a new set of capabilities, or updates and so on our consensus nodes. And so we don't just throw that on the mainnet, right? We do an extensive amount of testing, and then once that code is tested, it's passed a whole lot of quality checks, then we put it on Previewnet to give an opportunity to developers to have an advanced view, an early view at the new features coming up, also to accumulate testing feedback from the community. From Previewnet, things move to testnet, and then ultimately they move to the mainnet. But yeah, the idea is that people typically, they try something out on testnet, they prepare for a new feature, or they have their application for quality assurance on the testnet, and then they simply move to mainnet once they're ready to take that step and start paying in real HBAR and working with real HBAR.
Got it. And with this playground, it's cool. You can do all this in the browser. Do you find that most people come in and sort of the wow moment is like transferring HBAR straight away, or like do you find there's a common path through these things, or does it sort of vary as to how people use the playgrounds?
I think it's very, typically we see two paths for how people are using the playgrounds. Sometimes people use the playgrounds to get on board it and learn. Some other people use it to quickly try out a new idea. So it's not only for new developers, it's also for existing developers. And I've gotten a ton of feedback from developers in our community, even internal colleagues that tell me, hey, these playgrounds are fantastic. Like sometimes I have an idea that I want to propose or talk with a customer about, and I just go to the playground, try it out, and then I have something concrete to show. So nice. It's also a vehicle for exploration and not just onboarding. But I think it does a great job at facilitating both of those flows.
Nice. And you switched tabs here. We're in the contract builder playground, right?
That is correct. So I mentioned earlier that developers have that Web 2 path, or traditional software development path. And then we're also EVM compatible. So anything that you can do on Ethereum, you can do here. And if you're a smart contract dev that is either looking to migrate away from a different network, or you're just getting started with Solidity and smart contracts, this contract builder is a fantastic place to start. And it's also embedded on that developer portal. So here you see, I also have my ECDSA account. I have the same ability to like clear my code, share it, and so on. And then what I love about the contract builder is that it gives me templates, to work with different types of contracts, whether I want to have a basic getter setter, simple storage, and we're going to be adding more to this list of templates. But then it also gives you these well-known standards so that you can easily deploy an ERC20 on Hedera, by just parameterizing a few things, clicking and so on. Same with a 721 or ERC 1155. And then we also have this Hedera token service where we have native Hedera tokens. We have a system contract that interacts with our EVM so that you can also complete or code and deploy and interact with these type of contracts. So, if we wanted to create a new fungible token, and then maybe say we wanted to do an airdrop of that token, I can simply select those functions. I can compile. I accept the disclaimer. We're just telling you, hey, these contracts are not audited, and you should be aware of any risks of working with smart contracts. But then here, my contract just compiled in the browser. I didn't have to install Sol-C or any other compiler or anything else. I can also choose this to verify the contract. I can see the artifacts that were generated from that compilation step. And then I just deploy it. So basically with 4 clicks, I just coded a smart contract that is going to create a fungible token, is going to airdrop it, and then verify my contract. And now I'm deploying it on the Hedera testnet. So that's that acceleration and that convenience and that ease of use is what I love about these playgrounds.
Nice. Yeah, very cool. And I guess for someone who's not super familiar with Hedera or who hasn't been, like, why would someone sort of go down the Hedera token service path rather than sort of the ERC20 path or anything like that?
That's a great question. It all comes down to requirements, right? Some people, they have to work with ERC standards. We provide that path here. The Hedera token service is very unique because it benefits from those scalability and performance and finality, attributes that I mentioned about our Hashgraph consensus algorithm. So if you think about an ERC token or ERC 721 token, those tokens are represented in the state of the contract. Like it's still a smart contract that you're using to create that token. On the other hand, when you think about these Hedera token service tokens, these are native entities of the ledger. So you don't really have to, they're not represented as contracts. They're literally native entities of the ledger. So what that means is you can transfer these at 10,000 transactions per second. You get, a lower cost of operating these tokens. And so it comes to what you're trying to do. And we have an application, an accelerator called Stablecoin Studio that actually uses this hybrid approach of using smart contracts for management and issuance of your token. And it uses the Hedera token service for all those peer-to-peer transactions that may need fast finality, low cost, and a lot of throughput. So that's one way to look at it. It all comes down to requirements, but what the Hedera token service gives you is that high scalability, performance, and low cost from the native consensus algorithm.
Got it, got it. So if I'm following, you can choose sort of one path or the other, or you can go with both.
You can choose one path or the other. I mean, typically, if you're going to have a token, you're going to choose to represent it as an ERC standard or as an HTS token, right? And Hedera gives you both of those abilities with its EVM.
Got it, got it. Cool. And is there? You mentioned sort of things coming with the playground. I think supporting Rust and more templates here. Is there anything you sort of wanted to highlight in the playground now, or sort of coming soon?
Absolutely. One thing I do want to highlight is that this was done in collaboration with a community project, right? So I want to call out those guys. It's the Kabila team. They're the largest NFT launchpad and NFT tools platform on Hedera. And so they did a fantastic job, helping identify the requirements, implementing this work. And so that collaboration and that partnership has been tremendously impactful and beneficial for the ecosystem. So it's just an example. By the way, these tools are also open source, so people, can improve them and so on and customize. But yeah, that collaboration with community and ecosystem is a highlight, for me, and one of the things that I love about our Hedera network and ecosystem. In terms of new things coming up, yep, we're adding Rust. We're going to be adding more languages as well. We're big on AI right now. We have a hackathon going on in AI, so you don't be surprised if you start seeing AI features on some of these playgrounds. In fact, one thing that I want to talk to you about with AI is also this tool that is fantastic for onboarding, and it's a custom GPT, right? So it's called Hedera HiveMind. If you have ChatGPT, go find it, and it's a great way to onboard, to learn, to ask it questions. It can even take actions for you on the testnet and on the mainnet. So just to give you a quick example of how cool this is, I'm going to grab my account ID from my developer portal, and I'm just going to ask it, what's my balance on the testnet, right? So what's the balance of this account ID on testnet? And so in the background, this GPT has a lot of knowledge, a lot of context of our documentation, of our SDKs, and it has actions that it can take with our mirror node, which you guys provide as a service for mainnet and for testnet. So what you see here is that it's asking me, hey, I need to talk to the Hedera testnet mirror node, and so I'm going to allow that, and you'll see that it's going to retrieve that balance through the mirror node REST API. So, and what we have here is 85,000. A whole lot of tiny bars, which in the end comes back to 852 HBAR. So if we want to double check that, I can see it here. That is correct, right? And we can always check that on Hashcan as well. So you can ask it questions like that. It can be a debugging partner. If you have smart contracts, you can ask it things about the results of your transactions, your smart contracts, questions about tokens. Or you can ask it for examples, right? Hey, give me an example of how to start with the Hedera consensus service and so on. So anyway, that was a big parentheses there about things that are coming for AI on these playgrounds. And, we have more and more on AI as well. We recently announced an AI studio. So it's a collection of open source tools for devs, to adopt agentic workflows more easily with Web3 and with Hedera. And then in terms of an upcoming opportunity, stay tuned for hackathons. So we have one that is wrapping right now. There's a demo day where the best projects are pitching their submissions publicly. That's happening right now. So you can tune right after this. And then we're going to have a hackathon also coming up in July. So stay tuned for that, because AI is also going to be a big theme, but there will be opportunities for things like tokenization and other topics.
Nice. And am I right that you generally sort of run your hackathons over sort of a longer period of time, and then, as you say, it sort of culminates in the demo day? Is that right?
Typically. I mean, we also do weekend hackathons. So, with Ethereum developers, I know they love their event hackathons that happen over a period of 3 days, and it's a very intensive period to focus and create something cool. But we also open up an opportunity over a longer period, 3 to 4 weeks, because we understand that professionals need sleep. They're also balancing family and work and other priorities. So typically we allow for 3 to 4 weeks for these hackathons. And so this one that just happened was 3 weeks. The one that is coming in July will also be about 3 weeks. So you got plenty of time to register, think about your ideas, and then actually execute and build.
Nice. And in terms of the sort of development of the network, people might be familiar with on Ethereum. There's the EIPs or the proposals for how Ethereum might be developed, and then it sort of goes from there. How does that work in Hedera land?
Great question. So Ethereum has EIPs. We have HIPs or HIPs. They used to be Hedera Improvement Proposals. Now they're Hyro Improvement Proposals. And so I'll explain the Hedera and Hyro thing. Hedera has been the first layer one that donated its entire code base to a very well structured and organized initiative or foundation like the Linux Foundation. And so that contribution of its entire code base to the Linux Foundation went to the Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust. And we were the first ledger to do that. And so there in that project, our code base lives as Project Hyro. And so the way you can think of Hedera now is Hedera is a specific instance of that Hyro code base, right? Because now what can happen is any enterprise, any conglomerate, any group, any individual can, take that Hyro code base and spin up their own version of Hedera, right? So that is where we went to Hyro Improvement Proposals, or HIPs.
Got it. And are there any? I'm sure there's a bunch going on, but are there any sort of HIPs you wanted to highlight or mention that the audience might be interested in?
Oh man, that's a long topic, but I want to highlight maybe. I'll highlight 2 of them. The first one is batch transactions. So that one will be coming up soon. I think it's a matter of weeks or months. But the idea is that you can take those native transactions that you can do on Hedera using those SDKs, and you can actually group them up in an atomic flow, right? So that if any one transaction fails, they all fail. And so the power of that is that you can, automate fairly complex sequences of operations. And what it does, it gives you a smart contract-like logic without having to even, code in Solidity. So, I could do a sequence of things where I create my NFT, I associate my account with that NFT, I transfer that NFT, and then I pause it, and I can do all of that as a single atomic transaction flow, right? Whereas today, those are 5 or 4 separate transactions that I have to do. And so, yeah, it just brings the power of those native capabilities to a new level. And then, so that will be HIP 551, or Atomic Batch Transactions. The other HIP that I want to talk about, I actually have a community call, so you can tune into that tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern. But we're going to go deep into block streams and block nodes. I don't know the HIP number for those, but those are going to be game changers. And what happens there is a refactoring of the output streams that come from our consensus nodes. So yeah, I'll just leave it there so that I don't bore you with the details. If you want all the details, tune into that community call tomorrow.
Awesome. Cool. And one thing I didn't sort of have you highlight further up front, for people that, again, aren't familiar with Hedera, you've got sort of the mirror node structure, and then you've got RPC methods, or the JSON RPC relay that people would see an EVM underscore, an ETH underscore method, and be familiar with that. Do you want to just highlight the difference there?
Sure thing. So we have the consensus nodes, right? Those are the nodes processing transactions, updating the state of the ledger. And then what we have, I guess, as the next layer is mirror nodes. And those mirror nodes are the ones responsible for history and archival of all the transactions, right? The reason we have that separation of consensus and mirror nodes is mirror nodes today at a throttle, capacity, they can process 10,000 transactions per second. If they're processing consensus and history, each node would grow insanely, right? And so what we have is those consensus nodes are optimized to go very fast, to come to consensus really fast, but then the history and archival is passed on to the mirror nodes. And so those mirror nodes, is what you query to get transaction history typically. Developers who are coming from the Web2 world, the native devs, they can access everything they need from consensus nodes and mirror nodes. However, if you're an EVM developer, you're used to working with JSON RPC relay or JSON RPC as the tool that is going to do some of the translation between what you already know and this paradigm of on Hedera, right? And so that JSON RPC relay is almost like a translator where you can give it, you can give it transactions with Ethereum tools, Ethereum wallets, and that JSON RPC relay will, translate how to speak to a mirror node, how to speak to a consensus node, so that you as an EVM developer have the same experience on any other EVM chain. And so, yeah, that's what I would say about the JSON RPC. I think it's a fantastic service, that you guys provide, and a fantastic utility that is needed for that EVM compatibility that we provide. So, I'm very appreciative of Validation Cloud as a partner.
Thank you. Yeah, we've been partnered for a good while now. And I guess you sort of touched on the playground. If someone's watching this or finds this and is new to the Hedera sort of world, would you start them by sort of a search of Hedera Playground and then find their way to your portal, or where would someone sort of best place to get started?
I think that's a fantastic place. If you just go to Hedera Portal or Hedera Playground, actually, I think that's a great way to start playing with things on the browser, get a feel for it, start experimenting, and right there you're gonna find the relevant links, right, to open your account to continue that testing in more depth. And the playground itself will take you to the documentation, right? So that's another place. Although I will say, with AI, less and less people are reading documentation. I know I've been able to build pretty crazy things without reading a single page of documentation. I just, work with the AI. And so that's another place to start. That's why I wanted to show you the Hedera HiveMind GPT, because that can be a really good assistant as well. But don't forget to check out documentation every now and then, just to know details and nuances.
Nice. And the playground's got a faucet built in, right, for testnet, so you can sort of get some tokens to get started.
That's a fantastic point, Aaron, because some of the feedback that is, very positive is Hedera is one of the easiest networks to get test tokens. If you open your testnet account through that portal, you're going to get 1,000 HBAR. You can get up to 1,000 HBAR every 24 hours for test HBAR, right? You just have to claim those HBAR. If you consume them all, you can get, 1,000 every 24 hours. And then if you don't want to open an account, you also have the Hedera Faucet, which is also accessible through that portal, but you can develop anonymously, and that'll give you 100 HBAR for a given account every 24 hours as well. So the cap is a little lower on that one, but still generous enough for you to do a lot of smart contract development or any kind of development you might want to do.
Nice. And I guess just rounding out with sort of some use cases and apps. Again, if people aren't familiar with Hedera, so you've got things like SaucerSwap, which is a decentralized exchange on Hedera, which would be sort of equivalent to Uniswap on Ethereum. Then you've got things like Bonzo Finance, which is lending protocol like Aave on Hedera. I guess, are there any sort of things you want to talk about in terms of use cases or apps, or is it a case of like, if you're familiar with a type of thing on another EVM chain, then you're sort of going to find it on Hedera?
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. And I love both of those projects that you mentioned. SaucerSwap being, the fantastic developer or decentralized exchange. They have a fantastic developer team. And then also the Bonzo guys being the leading lending and borrowing protocol. As you said, both of those guys have, brought the Uniswap equivalents and the Aave equivalents to Hedera from other ecosystems. There are things beyond DeFi and NFTs on Hedera as well. Talking about NFTs, I do want to call Hedera Centex, a fantastic marketplace for NFTs that leverages all of those native capabilities for great NFTs. But then when we think about tokenization, I think that's a vertical that has a lot of interest from institutional players. So because we're seeing, not only the tokenization of money with stable coins, but also the tokenization of real world assets. And so that's where I like to highlight Red Swan, Diamond Standard, and even Archex, right? Because all of those guys are tokenizing or working with institutions to tokenize real estate, diamonds, and paper assets, right? Bonds, money markets, and so on. So, and not to mention green finance. That's also an area where you can tokenize carbon assets like offsets and credits. And I think we have a very strong lead and strength with the Hedera Guardian on that front. So, I could go on and on with use cases. The other one I want to highlight that is very retail friendly is karate combat. And I don't even know how to describe karate because it's just so awesome. But it's almost like sports betting, but through also tokenization, because they have tokens that allow people to vote on their favorite fighter. They use that token to reward the fighters. So it's just an overall fantastic way to engage retail and uh, transfer value with Web3. So that's one of the things I love from that karate combat use case. I'll leave it there, but if you want to talk about use case, please contact me or, go to hedera.com/ecosystem. There are extensive explanations and, use cases for each one of these projects and use cases.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. That's a good sort of rounding out of like the different sort of things going on Hedera. So you mentioned hedera.com/ecosystem. I guess if people are interested, you also have a Discord. Like, is that where people should also sort of go to engage in the community?
That is a fantastic place to go, hedera.com/discord. So there you'll be able to connect with our community members, with our Hashgraph and Hedera experts. And interestingly enough, we came full circle because that was one of the first places where I joined the ecosystem on Discord and also following on Reddit and Twitter. And so I think it's a fantastic place to start. But if you want to follow on other social media channels like X, just find Hedera and follow us there. And that's a fantastic way to stay up to date with everything happening on the ecosystem.
Awesome. Very cool. Right, Ed, I'll give you sort of an opportunity to do any last word or any highlights that you're sort of excited about for the rest of the year for Hedera, and then I'll wrap us up after that. So I guess over to you.
Awesome, Aaron. Thank you so much. One of the things that I'm excited about is continuing to engage and attract developers. I think we have a very bright set of opportunities in front of us, especially with these key narratives like tokenization and Web3 and AI and Web3, right? Because I think these intersections of these technologies and these use cases that can emerge in those intersections are really the thing that is going to change the world and are going to propel that adoption of Web3. Because now we're solving real life problems, right? In AI, we have to consider traceability, we have to consider authenticity, data integrity, and value exchanges. And I think Web3 is the right technology to support the agentic flows that we're seeing in action right now. I mean, if you look at the Microsoft Build conference and Google conference, they're all about AI and agents. And so we're benefiting tremendously by providing value to those flows. And then with tokenization, I also mentioned, from the institutional perspective, paper assets, real world assets, tremendous value there to increase the access to assets that we've never had access before, to increase the liquidity of some of those assets, and also the transparency of the movement of the value of those assets. I think are some of the key benefits that Web3 and Hedera and tokenization can bring to many verticals. Those are the two narratives that I'm most excited about. And then, yeah, in terms of closing thoughts, I would say just get started, right? Like many of us are thinking about how do I transition into Web3 or how do I get started or how do I migrate my application? My advice is just do it. Go to that playground, contact us and just get started because I think the hardest step is the first one. I think from there, everybody can succeed.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. So thank you to the audience for attending. So this is going to be uploaded on YouTube if you didn't catch the full stream. You can follow Validation Cloud on YouTube and X and LinkedIn. And with that, we'll say thank you to Ed and his LED kitchen, and we'll wrap up. Thank you all.